Over the last 6 months or so, I've been getting a lot of questions in the LFF inbox about reducing backs. So today I wanted to have an entire video dedicated to it. We're going to discuss what are reducing backs, what are their pros and cons, and are they a good excuse for you to skip 4x5 and go right to 8x10? Hey there, and welcome to Large Format Friday. I'm your host, Matt Marrash. Every other Friday here on the channel, we're going to be here and we're going to be chatting about something large format. So reducing backs. In their simplest terms, reducing backs are supplementary spring backs that we can pop onto our already large format camera and shoot a smaller size film. For example, if I want to shoot 4x5 film in my 8x10 camera, I can place my reducing back in place of my 8x10 spring back, and now I can insert normal 4x5 film holders and go to town. So historically, reducing backs were a business decision for photographers. If you were a local studio photographer and you were the one place to get portraits in your town, you probably had a big studio camera, like an 8x10 or maybe even an 11x14 camera. These were typically standing on like a big wooden or wrought iron studio stand, and you really couldn't haul them around. And unless you wanted to target only the richest customers in your town, you wanted to have the ability to service other customers who still wanted portraits. So to do that, you would place on a reducing back, which allowed you to shoot a smaller piece of film so you could offer those services without having to waste money on a big piece of film you weren't using anyway. Now, there were a few other ways for photographers to reduce the size of the picture they were taking. A lot of large format cameras, including this Tachihara right here, also have these little slats carved in the back right in front of the ground glass, and those would allow photographers to insert these little pieces of wood or now ABS plastic that allow you to shoot multiple pictures on the same piece of film. Another way for photographers to get more mileage out of a big piece of film would be to use what's called a split dark slide. This is a dark slide that's literally cut in half or a long series of strips that allow you to shoot multiple pictures by reinserting the dark slide and masking over the film plane. Anytime you use masks like that, though, you have to remember things are flipped and it's easy to get confused unless you've practiced it a lot. The use case for reducing backs today has more to do with what all stuff you already have and what you want to haul around with you. So if you already have a big 8x10 or 5x7 camera and you often want to shoot something smaller or maybe get more reach with your lenses, you can travel around with a reducing back and do that as well. So now that we have some background covered on reducing backs, what are the pros and cons? One of the big pros to using a reducing back is now you have more versatility with your single camera. If I have an 8x10 camera, I can get a 5x7 reducing back, 4x5 reducing back, really whatever I want to reduce it to, as long as the manufacturer makes it or I can find someone who will make it for me. This gives more life to an already existing camera without having to buy an entire separate kit. Another advantage to using reducing back on your already bigger large format camera is you get effectively longer focal lengths. This is because we're cropping in on that larger projected image circle and we're seeing less of it, which gives us a crop factor. Anybody that's come from the digital photography side of things talking about full frame versus crop frame, this is the same exact thing. We're taking a bigger image circle, we're seeing less of it, and that effectively crops in. Alongside that crop factor from that reduced image circle, we can also now do more camera movements. I can shift more, rise and fall, and even do really extreme tilts and swings with the camera and not run out of image circle as long as I'm using lenses that cover the native size. So for an 8x10, I need 8x10 coverage lenses. 5x7, 4x5, this yada yada. Another big advantage when you're using a reducing back to shoot smaller size film, generally as you go smaller and smaller on film size, you're going to have way more inexpensive films and more options available. Now, this doesn't include 5x7 and more of the funky film sizes like 2x3, 3x4, and other ULF sizes. Those ones are going to be special order and even more limited than this guy right here. So while those are some pretty nice advantages, there's also some big downsides to using a reducing back. The first of which, you gotta buy more stuff. If you buy a reducing back, sure, it's not as expensive as a camera, but you still have to buy things like film and film holders. That's gonna be more things in your kit, and if you're not gonna be using it often, this just becomes large format fluff that you're not gonna use any other time. My personal opinion, I've used this reducing back probably 4 times in the last 5 to 6 years. That's not a good value proposition. That makes this a very glorified paperweight, and it still has some dust on it. So kind of the opposite of the point of getting more reach out of lenses, if you use a lot of wide-angle lenses, you have severely limited wide-angle options, and that's because you're using a natively larger camera. This Tachihara 8x10 goes down to about 100 millimeters of bellows, which is absolutely squishing those things together. And when you crunch them that close, you start to limit the ability of the standards to start to rise, shift. Any movements, they're pretty much gone when you scrunch the bellows that close. Plus, you can start to tear things and wear it really easily. Not a good plan. So when you're looking at a reducing back, consider the camera that you've got and whether or not it can accept a separate bellows, like a bag bellows, or what that maximum and minimum limitation on that bellows is. It might not match up with what you're trying to do. Another downside to using a reducing back on a large format camera is resolving power. Now, stepping from 8x10 to 5x7 or 8x10 to 4x5 is not really a big thing, but if you're gonna use something like an 8x10 ready lens, and you're gonna shoot something even smaller than 4x5, like popping this medium format roll film back in this, you're gonna start to see significant softening of your image. Nothing has really changed about how this lens does, but what is changing is how much we're magnifying the image. For more information on resolving power and the negative effects of over-magnification, I recommend checking out this previous season's episode about depth of field. Another pretty obvious downside, if I want to shoot 4x5 on my 8x10 camera, I have to have this and an 8x10 camera. The cameras are bigger, heavier, and more expensive. And if I want lenses that are gonna do both things, the lenses that cover this guy are gonna be significantly more expensive than the lenses that cover this one right here. So for example, standard lenses. This is a 355 millimeter standard lens. This is a 180 millimeter. It's a little bit longer than standard, but pretty close. This lens will set you back $300 to $400. This lens will set you back almost $1,000. But if I want one of the standard focal lengths that also happens to cover 8x10, now I'm looking at a super wide angle lens like this Schneider Super Simar XL, which is a whopping 10 times as expensive as this Nikkor 180 right here. So yes, I might save a few hundred, maybe even $1,000 by going with a reducing back over a dedicated camera, but by the time you factor in lenses, that cost savings is completely gone. Personally, do I think reducing backs are worth it? Well, if you already have a big camera, yeah, go for it. I'm not the boss of you, do what you want. But I think if your plan is to go to 8x10, buy a 4x5 reducing back, learn everything on that combination, and then consider whether or not you're gonna shoot the thing the camera is made for, you're doing it wrong. It's possibly the worst of both worlds because you have all of this extra stuff that you're buying, you're learning the dance on a larger camera, and you're not even sure that you like the format yet. Definitely rent or try out 4x5 before you want to go to this. In my opinion, reducing backs seem tempting, but their disadvantages outweigh their possible benefits. Even myself, I've owned this reducing back for like 5 or 6 years, and I can only count 4 times that I've used it. In fact, last month when I was testing out the Kentmere film for Medium Format Monday, I was shooting some photos with model Melro, and I realized I'd forgotten my 8x10 holders. I brought the whole 8x10 kit, but I didn't have the holders. Fortunately, I did have my reducing back, and Tariq loaned me some 4x5 T-Max, and we shot a few sheets alongside the Kentmere, and I'm really glad I did bring the 4x5 because it gave me more stuff to print when I was doing contact prints with the Kentmere film. So for that instance, I was glad I had the reducing back, but honestly, to get the wider look I needed, I used my crazy wide angle Schneider 121mm, which isn't that wide on 4x5, and I would have killed to have an even wider look. But I did it anyway. I had way less movements, and the whole thing was a bit of a struggle versus just using a native 4x5 camera, which was also in the studio at the time. So to wrap things up, reducing backs are a way for photographers to shoot a smaller size film in their already big, large format camera. It can help you save some money, maybe a little bit of weight, and maybe a little bit of effort and not having extra cameras just hanging out on the shelf. If you don't even have a large format kit yet, maybe, but probably not. It's just gonna be extra money you're throwing at something you don't even know you like yet. Now, if the situation is something like you're looking at the Intrepid camera, where their reducing backs are really affordable, yeah, maybe it is a decent option for you, but everybody's gonna differ from there. If you have any other questions about reducing backs, or you wanna let me know what your situation is with reducing backs, let me know down below in the comments. For any of those longer form questions, you can always hit me up, largeformatquestions@gmail.com. Thanks again for stopping by, and we'll catch you next time for more Large Format Friday.